Hello, webinar attendees. My name is Marisol Morales, and I serve as the Vice President for Network Leadership with Campus Compact. We're so happy to have you with us today on our 11th webinar as part of our National Webinar Series this year. This webinar is titled High Impact Community Engaged Learning Practices and Processes. And I'll be introducing our panelists shortly, but before I get started, there's a few things that I want to do reminders and plugs for. One is that we just released our call for proposals for next year's National Webinar Series. So if you have something that you would like to share, a best practice, any research, please take a look at that. I will be sharing the link to the RFP in the chat box, and you can take a look at that. Those will be due April 3rd. So please share with us any ideas or research that you have that you think would be part of a great webinar for next year. In addition to that, we've released our membership engagement survey. So I'll also be sharing a link for that in the chat. And we really want to hear from you as campus, as folks who come from Campus Compact member institutions, to learn a little bit more about what your experience is, some of the things that you'd like to see coming out of Campus Compact. And you should be, for those of you who have registered for our national conference, there'll be some communication coming out later today regarding that. Now I'll introduce our panelists. First is Lynn Donahue. Lynn is the Assistant Director of the Institute for Civic and Community Engagement at St. John Fisher's College and the founder and director of the college's Community Engaged Learning or Service Learning program. Under Donahue's leadership, Fisher engages 700 undergraduate and graduate students per year in community-based projects embedded in course curriculum to address the client capacity building needs of the college's community partners in education, poverty, health, and sustainability. She's a published author and trainer on topics including reciprocity, pedagogy and assessment, engaged scholarship, project management, and leadership. Donahue is also the recipient of several grants to enhance children's social emotional learning and awards for participation in community and civic engagement. Next, we have Dr. Marta Rodriguez Galan, who's the Assistant Professor and Program Director of Gerontology at St. John Fisher's College. Professor Rodriguez Galan received her BA in Licensure Studies at the University of Oviedo, Spain, her MA in Hispanic Studies at the University of Rhode Island, and her PhD in Sociology at Northeastern University. Her dissertation project was awarded the Farnsworth Trust Fellowship in Aging Policy Research, 2006 to 2007. For the past few years, she has been conducting research in the areas of aging, health, social engagement, and family, with a particular focus on Hispanic, Latina communities in the United States. In her current research project on Latina grandmothers who are raising grandchildren, Professor Rodriguez Galan explores the interconnections of gender, immigration, and the life course, and how these shape the women's interpretation of the mother-grandmother role. Her work has been published in journal articles and book chapters in the field of gerontology, social gerontology. Next, we have Dr. Jim Bowen, who is Associate Professor of English at St. John Fisher's College. He does his teaching and research on rhetoric, academic and professional writing, hate rhetoric, demagoguery, travel, civic engagement, and Middle Eastern studies. He is currently co-editing a collection titled Global Civic Engagement, which studies writing projects involving US faculty and students in the international context. So welcome to our panelists, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start us off by running through the agenda. Today, we're going to be focusing on 3 high-impact practices: reciprocity, context and culture, and communication. And we'll illustrate those through 3 examples in a sociology course, Aging in the Life course, English professional writing, and a peace and social justice studies course, Social Change Through Service. So first I'm going to define what is community engaged learning, previously called service learning, which you're probably familiar with. Three important components. The first is meaningful student learning. And so this is where students engage in community-based projects and academic courses that connect the community projects to their academic goals and their course concepts. And we have it across the disciplines at St. John Fisher College in all 5 of our schools. The second piece is meaningful community outcomes. So the work that students do in the community has to meet community needs. And at Fisher, we define that before the semester begins and adds real value to the organizations. And we do that through direct service, or we call it client support, working with individuals through tutoring or literacy or oral history, and then capacity building projects that's doing capacity building needs with the community in more professional kind of capacity. Professional writing, which we'll hear about, and marketing and data analytics and those kinds of things with partners like nonprofits, schools, and small businesses. And then linking the two together is meaningful reflection and assessment. So we want to make sure students can apply what they're learning in the community to the course concepts and vice versa. And so like I said, this is our definition from the college. CEL connects capacity building projects with work with clients in the community within credit-bearing academic courses. And benefits are through employing these expertise of the faculty, student, and community partnerships, we're able to support the growth of organizations, enhance individual self-sufficiency, and then as a whole promote a more just society. And then for students, the results are through linking the academic content with experience through rigorous assignments and reflection, we're able to strengthen students' academic learning and their preparation for the work world, and then provide students with a knowledge, broad worldview, and commitment to become active and informed citizens. So how do we accomplish this? So we're going to review these 3 high-impact practices. And the first is achieving reciprocity, and I'm going to cover 2 components of that. First is asset-based community development, and the second is mutual benefit. And so the first is about how we approach our partnerships and approaching from a place of strength, not weakness. So taking the time to learn about organization and our partners' assets and the resources so that we work to have a collaboration that focuses on growth and common goals rather than focusing on the problems. And so that's easy to do, or at least hard to do, in a way that it's easy to focus on the issues of poverty or low educational outcomes or healthcare disparities, and that's important. We also want to focus on what are those goals for growth and what are some of the assets that we can use to address those issues. And so working together, we can create this growth. And so really also looking at the community may have the best understanding of what they need and what can work. And so, you know, within higher education, we can know something theoretically, and we may have some, you know, practical expertise, but we may not have an understanding of what really works within that organization based on direct experience. And so we combine that with what we do have, which is access to research and perspectives and resources to be able to accomplish our commonly defined goals. And so the mutual benefit piece is really what is identifying what are the academic goals of the course and the needs of the students, and then identifying what are the goals within the community and how can both of those be satisfied within a semester. And so developing a project then thinks also very practically about the time constraints of the semester, the skill level of the students, and the resources of faculty that guide this work. And then on the community end, what is doable given the time constraints and their resources to guide the work? And how can we put this all together to create projects and partnerships that is of mutual benefit and, like I said, leads to reciprocal outcomes? The second piece is educating about context and culture. And so there's 2 components of that, a community context and the cultural context. So the community context is about really preparing students and faculty to really best understand the organization and the social issues, and being able to make sure that we fully understand and then communicate what are the goals of the community partner and the desired outcomes from the students' work and the value of that work. And so this can be accomplished through orientations and visits on site to make sure that all are really well versed in the value that this work has to the organization and the desired outcomes. What do we want to see different as a result of this work together? And then in addition to that, thinking about some of these big picture issues. And of course, this depends on the different projects and the course and the partnership. So it's all unique, but looking at issues of sustainability or ageism or poverty, and how can we integrate that context into the course to best understand the issues and the value added, but also when developing solutions. And where relevant and depending on the course, is it appropriate to dive deeper into an understanding of the root causes of these issues and things like historical inequalities. And then using reflections and assignments to make sure that we're connecting the academic concepts with the community context. And so the cultural competency context piece is more individual. It's about the interactions between the students and the faculty and the community people that we're working with, and especially in the direct service, client support kind of roles. What kind of opportunities are there for students to build those trusting relationships with the individuals they're working with, whether it's young children or youth or older adults, to really better understand this context, to understand their perspectives and the culture of the community, both to really enhance the impact of those relationships, but to be able to also understand the perspectives and the audience so that you can best create those solutions and that desired result. Equally, it's important to understand the perspectives that you bring to the situation. And so again, depending on the course, it's really important for students to understand, and faculty, to understand the perspectives and biases they might bring to the relationships based on their past experiences, preconceived notions. Everybody has bias, and so being more aware of that allows us to better understand our role and what we bring to the situation and how we interpret that situation, and again, to increase impact. And then also building students' cultural communication skills. So this might be with the individuals they're working with, or this might be with the staff that they're working with, or if they're serving as consultants to a client, how to best get the results that they want. And so it's tailoring communication strategies to diverse audiences to effectively express and listen to others. So again, if at all possible, to help students to be able to frame those communication situations for best impact. And then the third piece is communicating for impact. And so there's communication in the planning process, the implementation, and then the conclusion part of the semester. And so in terms of planning tools and communication, you want to use your meetings. One-on-one, face-to-face is always ideal. Phone, email communication. You want to use those wisely at the beginning of the semester to understand what those mutual goals are that I talked about before, and the outcomes. Clarify what's the professor's role, what is the community partner's role, what is the student's role, and what are some of the logistics, and really honing in on those. And at St. John Fisher College, we use a document called a project plan to be able to then document all of those details that we've discussed, share that with all the audience, or all the participants, and then use that as we go along throughout the semester to refer to. And that also includes a schedule of who does what when. So very practical, but really important when you're looking at this process from a more project management approach. During the semester, there's these implementation tools to enhance communication. And so using documents, an example I'll share is using a Google Doc that is shared with teammates and shared with professors, can be shared with community partners, so that everyone is documenting the progress that's being met and has an opportunity to obtain feedback. And then again, using meetings wisely. So that might be a team meeting of students during the semester in class or outside of class. It might be a mid-semester feedback meeting with a community partner. It might be meeting with a professor to track progress and to debrief and enhance learning. And then at the conclusion of the semester, it's using your final meetings, which might be a gathering to hand over the final product, making sure you have a plan to do that. It might be debrief meetings to reflect on lessons learned and what was accomplished, and then there might be gatherings to celebrate the partnerships, especially with direct service. And then using communication tools, which really are like assessment tools, surveys to obtain feedback so that we can then inform future practices and make sure we're using these good practices. And so we use Qualtrics to send out surveys to students, faculty, and community partners. And then we use tools like PowerPoint or video or other kinds of tools to convey what was learned and the impact during final presentations in class. So now I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Marta Rodriguez Galan to be able to overview her course as an example of this.
All right, so I'm going to be reporting on an intergenerational program we have entitled Bridges Across Generations. So the Bridges Across Generations Service Learning Project is comprised of 2 different courses, my Sociology of Aging course, and then there's also a Biology of Aging course. But for today, I'm just going to report on the sociology piece. So the sociology sub-project is entitled the Elder Experiences Project. And this is a course that I've been teaching since 2011. So I've been teaching different versions of this course, this service learning course, for the past 9 years. And essentially, what the Elder Experience Project involves is bringing senior citizens and students together to share their experiences and learn about issues that relate to aging. So we hold sessions in the classroom, and we also visit the elders in their communities. The students learn about different topics in the course. For example, they learn about ageism, family relationships as we age, health and healthcare, housing and support services for elders, end-of-life issues. So they learn about various topics, and then they try to relate their theoretical understanding of those topics to the experiences of seniors. And at the end, the students attempt to capture some aspect of aging from the perspective of the elder by writing a narrative. So they write a narrative from the perspective of the other person that they have been working with, and they share this narrative with the person. So I'm going to be discussing now how reciprocity is developed to enhance impact. And as Lynn Donahue said before, we use an asset-based approach. So for my course, what that means is that we work with the community partner to identify the strengths and also the needs of the community. But we emphasize the strengths that the older adults can bring to our project. So for example, in our case, the strengths of the senior citizens are their life experiences in terms of both their professional histories and their personal histories, the wisdom, the lessons that they have accumulated over the years, as well as their social skills, because many of the senior citizens that we work with are very active in the community, they are leaders in their community. So those are the strengths that we emphasize. And then we work to mitigate some of the weaknesses. So for example, working with older adults, there may be some hearing loss. So that may be a challenge if we want to have discussions in the classroom. So in order to address that, we use microphones in the class. Some older adults may need a walker, right? So we may have some mobility issues. So we have to adapt the space by reserving an accessible room for the meetings to happen, right? So again, we try to address some of these weaknesses, but emphasizing the strengths of elders. And we also foster the relationships between students and elders. We do that by engaging both in formal discussions of topics, but also providing some space just for socialization between elders and students, watching a movie together or just having some social time together after each session or at the beginning of each session. So we're fostering these relationships because that to us is as important as the discussion of academic topics, because we're trying to dispel the myths and stereotypes of aging and developing positive relationships between 2 very far apart distinct generations. In terms of the mutual benefit for this service learning project, for our students, the main academic goal is to relate their theoretical and research-based understanding of the various topics of aging that we discuss in class to the life experiences of older adults. And then for the elders themselves, they crave a meaningful connection to a generation that they may not have a lot of contact with, because many of them live in retirement communities or they just don't have connections with the college age population. So it's an opportunity to connect with this generation and also for them to review their lives, what we call in gerontology the need for a process of life review, to look back on your life and evaluate your life, right? So we provide a space for that through this experience. So, so the elders can also participate in the discussions that we have with students. So it's overall meaningful experience for both students and elders. In terms of context to enhance the impact of our project, with respect to community-based context, we have, first of all, an introduction to the communities by our agency contact at the beginning of the semester. We work with 2 organizations, and each of the representatives from these organizations talk about their community, the services they offer, what they do. And also at the end of the semester, we have a celebration where we go to the sites and we have a tour of the facilities and we celebrate the project. And then throughout the semester, we hear the testimonies of elders about their experiences growing older in these communities. And this relates, again, to the readings that we provide for students throughout the semester. So, for example, in class, they are also learning from an evidence-based perspective about aging services, about different types of formal and informal social support for elders, about the experience of ageism or age discrimination, about the diversity of aging experience, right? And then they relate this through their discussions with elders to the experiences and observations and insights of the elders. And we also have continuous reflection exercises to try to have a discussion about those topics. With respect to the cultural context, we are working with 2 very distinct demographically aging communities. So one of the communities is Valley Manor, which is an independent living community, and is comprised mostly of white upper middle class and very old, older adults, which means that they are mostly 80 years old or older. And then our other partner is the Community Place of Rochester. This is a non-residential community. It is a community-based organization that offers aging services. And the participants from this organization are volunteers in the community, and they are mostly Latino and African-American older adults. They tend to be lower income, and they're also younger old adults, which means that they are in their 60s and 70s. So because we have these 2 distinct communities, the students are learning about the diversity of aging experiences, and we also provide the tools for students to also be able to analyze those differences in experiences by gender, for example, social class, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or nationality. So they learn this in the books, in the articles that they read, but also through the testimonies and the observations and the insights that the elders share with us. With respect to communication tools that we use to enhance impact, we use different communication tools at each of the steps of the planning and organization and implementation of the project. So for example, we start with some orientation during the summer months. So we work with the community partners to identify the mutual benefits, the strengths and the needs of the organization, to work out the logistics. And then we have a recruitment session, right? So in the recruitment session, very often, Dr. Linda, he also comes to the recruiting session. So we talk to the community about service learning, what it is, about my specific project and what we're trying to accomplish. And we answer any questions that I may have, right? So that's how we identify potential participants for our project. And then we have an orientation at the beginning of the semester. We bring senior citizens to the campus. Many of them have never visited our campus. So we give them a tour of the campus, we have lunch. And then the first meeting with students, we do an orientation for both students and elders, where we go over the details of the project. And we do a fun activity that we call speed date, right? So this is actually a fun way for everybody to get to meet everybody, right? So we ask students to date for 5 minutes each of the elders. So they move around the class, they move around the different tables, and they meet everyone. And it's a fun way to get to know each other. They also provide feedback about those meetings. And so that's how I try to match students with elders. If they, for example, connected very well with one person, I try to pair them for the entire experience of the Elder Experiences project. Other tools that we use to enhance communication, sort of the essence of my project is the interviews that the students are conducting with elders. So it's a kind of informal interview, but it's based on a formal protocol that we call the life history interview. So I train students on the life history interview, how to conduct a life history interview, and how to adapt it to the various topics that we are discussing. So the students are trained on this instrument, this protocol. but they also bring their own discussion questions about each of the topics that we cover for each session. And then finally, at the end, we have debriefs with elders and students separately. So for example, at the conclusion of the project, I go on site to the two communities that we work with, and we have a debrief with the elders. We sit in a circle and we talk very candidly about how everything went and what they like or what could be improved, right? So that actually the debriefs are very helpful for me to continue to work with this organization. We get many repeat customers for the next year, and that's a great way for me to continue to improve this experience for the elders. And the same theme for students. So at the end of the semester, we have a debrief session. The students, in addition to writing the narrative, are also writing a reflection paper. So they bring their reflections and we all talk about how this elder experience project enhanced their learning in the classroom. So I think I have a couple of quotes. So I'll read one quote from a student. So this student stated at the end of the class that the class opened my eyes to how people of different socioeconomic classes may experience aging differently. This was very evident by the people that participate in the community place of Rochester compared to those from Valley Manor. The service learning experience brought these differences to my attention, and as I enter the medical field, I should keep in mind that people in different socioeconomic classes may have different worries and needs when it comes to their medical care. And you can read the other quote from the community partner. I don't want to take too much time. We have some pictures also, if you want to browse them, of what the sessions look like. And I'm now gonna pass it on to my colleague, Dr. Baum.
Okay, so I'm going to describe a course that I taught in the fall, and the big difference between this and what Marta just described is that this is going to be 3 different community partners in one class, and we were doing capacity building. So it was a professional writing class, and these were projects that we came up with the community partner that would produce some kind of deliverable that would help them do their work in their organization. So we weren't doing direct client support. And you'll see that difference in approach as I talk through some of the examples. So I'll start with reciprocity, and reciprocity starts with preliminary conversations with community partners. Like Marta, these, for a fall course, these happened in May and June. In one case, actually in 2 cases, through the summer months. And these meetings were really important. I've found in my 10 years of teaching service learning here at Fisher that when a community organization gets an opportunity to work with a university on something like this, just having the time and the space to think about what their needs are can be very generative and powerful for them. Sometimes it is a series of several meetings where we go back and forth and they explain to me some of what they need and some of the possibilities, and I will come back with what could be possible for us. And we often can't determine this in 1 hour, but having multiple meetings is actually good for us to develop some trust and develop that relationship too. As Lynn said, we do a project planning template, and this is really valuable. It doesn't solve all problems that can emerge in the future, but it can help people stay grounded about what is possible and not possible. It tends to be that early on in the planning process, we think very ambitiously, and then when it gets down to making a 6 or 8 or 10 week timeline, you have to really decide what is possible and what's to mutual benefit for both parties. The ongoing check-ins when you have multiple partners is time consuming, but it's one of the more important roles that we have as faculty. And by both parties, it's really 3 parties. It's the faculty communicating with the students and of course the faculty member communicating with the community partner. So when I think about context and how the context can enhance the impact, I want to think both about the context of higher ed and the impact that can have on community partners, and also how the impact of the community partners context can affect students, or how there can be impact for the students. When we provide a service that 300 level, 400 level writing students can provide, when they write a grant, when they present training materials or promotional materials, this can be something that a community organization has wanted to do for some time, sometimes for years, but they haven't had the resources to do it. And to be able to have students with advanced literacy skills put something like this together can create a lot of flexibility and resources that can really help their operations. The other thing that helps is community partners, and this is sort of secondary but still very valuable, are often not-for-profit organizations. In my case, my three partners most recently, one was a private school, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but that's okay. One was a private school that worked with children who were in poverty and had academic struggles. One did job training with an environmental sustainability kind of project, and one worked on anti-discrimination training for all kinds of different organizations. And all of these organizations, in addition to needing that deliverable very legitimately, they also were really happy to have the college students get to know their organization better. I think from their perspective, these are at the very least people who can better understand the work that they do, and beyond that, they could become future donors or volunteers perhaps. The way that the community partners context can affect students, the way that they learn about that context starts before they even meet their partners, before the students meet the community partner. I will collect all the material I can and share that with students and have them do reading and writing to kind of understand what they're about and to go over anything that students might not be familiar with about a particular community or the type of work that they do. And then this issue of what's going on with the community partner in their context emerges over the course of the project, whether you are writing a grant or a brochure or doing research to create some kind of deliverable. The students will be communicating with that community partner, but they'll also be communicating with me in reflections and journals that they write to help them better understand that context. In terms of communication tools, we've talked about how valuable Google Docs can be. I want to focus on the last three a little bit more, and it's important to have all of these, I think. Journal writing is communication between the students, just the students and me. The Google Doc is more of the public document, and that can be for me and everybody who's in the group. The journals are for me to keep track of what are people understanding, what are they comfortable with, are there conflicts with the community partner, for example, or misunderstandings, or with other groups. And a lot of good information comes in these periodic posts where the students know that they have my privacy and they can speak more openly. Face-to-face meetings are ideal, but they are not always possible, and they can be a challenge to arrange, especially if you're working in groups. I require at least 3 of those from the orientation meeting, 1 meeting in the middle of the project, and then a wrap-up meeting at the end. The last one is the one I'll talk just a little bit more about, and that is phone calls. And something that I've learned in the last couple of years is that I think our students, traditionally aged, I should say, are not as comfortable with phone calls as we would like and need a lot of support, not just in how to talk on the phone, but when to talk on the phone and when to use the phone as a way to address challenges that are coming up in the project and misunderstandings. And the students needed a lot of my help in this matter, because they would use email and rely on email, and often they wouldn't get an answer in what they thought was a timely way. And I would sort of help them judge in the professional world, in the not-for-profit world, what is an appropriate amount of time. And if email is not working, try to put a call in, and that will often be more effective. You can get more done that way. And so it was really important for me to be on top of that and to support students in knowing when to just get on the phone and call. A lot of them they're pretty anxious about that and uncertain. So there's a lot of value that we can contribute to them to help them navigate those kind of situations. So with grant writing, which is what I end up having a lot of my, not all of the students in these groups do, that they were really proud about the role that they could play in helping organizations get money that they will use to continue their operations and even develop. And you can see the one quote there from a student talking about the pride that they get and the value they see in that. And from the community partners perspective, this is somebody reflecting on a grant application, and they had written this grant before, but they didn't have the time and resources to go in and make it fresh, given how their program had changed over years. And so we had this role of updating their template, which would have taken them a great deal of time and thought that they didn't have. And so that ended up being something valuable for them and for us as well. Back to Lynn.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about a course that I teach. It's called Social Change Through Service, and the course goals are to examine some of the root causes of poverty and low educational outcomes and understand the challenges impacting our city of Rochester, and conversely, or at the same time, using an asset-based perspective to honor the strengths of the people in the community and consider ways to build resilience and self-reliance. And so a resiliency social emotional learning program called Seeds of Success was used as the students' community-engaged learning experience, where the students went into 2 city schools, one a charter school, one a city school, grades 1st and 2nd grade, and taught children resiliency principles using books and activities using a curriculum guide. And so reciprocity was developed to enhance impact through conversations initially with community partner to clarify what were the mutual goals. And so we looked at first the impact of poverty and trauma on children in their schools, and at the same time the schools focus on growing resiliency and their really caring approach to the well-being of the children. And then identifying that the Seeds of Success program was really ideal to supplement some of the social emotional learning that they were already receiving, but fill in the gaps of what they were not receiving, because we have such low outcomes, at least according to New York State tests for 3rd grade as an example. There's so much attention paid to math and reading that just not as much time for the social emotional piece, which is such a real bedrock and foundation for student success. So it was really well received, and the curriculum itself was really doable for the time that we had, a good match for what they needed, and then for our course content, it was ideal for my class, which I'll talk about in a bit. And the books and activities really met the interest and developmental level of the children. And so in terms of context and how that was used to enhance impact, the concepts that the students were learning in the class really equipped them to best understand what is going on within the city, what's going on within our city school district, and how this is impacting children. And so we talked about this high rates of child poverty, the highest in the nation of cities our size, of trauma-informed teaching practices as becoming really well-known and really respected as a way to approach working with children impacted by poverty, using an asset-based community development approach. And what does that mean in terms of looking at the assets of the school and the children? And then in terms of cultural competency skills, the students learned about perspective taking and empathy skills, implicit bias, and social identity, and learn specifically how can they interpret what they're seeing and what they're learning about. How can they use this as a lens to best understand the experience and understand behaviors, and how can they use that then to develop strategies for approaching the kids, and kids being kids as well, that we talked a lot about how to best achieve attention and harness the energy and enthusiasm of these children. And so in terms of communication tools, we use a pre-semester planning meeting like I referenced. I always talk to the principals first and then the teachers to review these desired outcomes and roles in the schedule using this project plan. So that was really helpful to really set the stage. And then students documented what they were going to be doing for each seed session in a Google Doc. So they were using a curriculum that has a lot of material, but they were able to choose based on their understanding of the kids and what they felt was the best fit. And so the team members would meet in my class at the end, but then share their findings on the Google Doc so they could then have that as a shared document for me to view and for the teacher to view, and then we could comment through added comments in that document. So I'm going to share both of those in a moment. And then there was a final celebration at the end with certificates and gifts for the kids and learning through a PowerPoint. And then this is hard to read probably, but the project plan, the general template is having a description of the course and the organization, the academic outcomes and goals and the community outcomes and goals, and then the roles of the professor and the roles of the community partner, and then a schedule is the last page. And so this gets distributed, at least for my class for the students, gets distributed to the community partner, and then the faculty use this to plan out their semester. And then these are just a few pictures of some of my students and some of the work they're doing with the books and the activities in class. And great relationships were formed, which is a really important component as well. These children, many of them don't have any experience working with college-going students, and really respected and bonded quickly with the students. And so the Google Doc, this is just a copy of the chart. It's course a Google Doc on a website that I actually created for this class. And so you can see that students had to document the book they chose, the discussion questions, the 2 activities they planned, and then they evaluated what worked well in the last session and how that would inform their future sessions. And that was shared among the team, so they all had that information. So they really were well prepared for each session going in. And so just to share 2 quotes from one from my student. She said a lot of the material she learned reflected the situations that happened in the classroom, and it allowed her to understand where the kids were coming from and what situations they might be facing. And then the community partner shared in person and here that they really appreciated the culturally responsive teaching on SEL, and that the students really learned and enjoyed the sessions. And the students were well prepared. And just as a side note, this year we're going through a process trying to document a pre and a post survey of the students' self-report and from the teachers to really understand what they're learning specifically from the beginning to the end of the semester. So just in quick summary, the high impact community engaged learning practices and processes we covered was reciprocity, context, and communication. And we will now take any questions you have.
There was a question that came up about sharing the university's planning document, and so that's what you shared in the PowerPoint, correct? And so that will go out with the when the slides go out to the participants.
Yes, the only information that wasn't captured in the slide is that we capture the contact information for everybody that's participating, and that's shared. And then in the last page is a schedule, and that's pretty much written out with weeks, like week 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it has the important dates, like when the students are beginning, when is their orientation, when is their benchmarks or something due, when do they need to follow up for feedback meetings with the community partner, when's the celebration at the end or the final handoff, you know, and any other important indicators during the semester. And then that is also shared through a Google Doc. And so we used to use, you know, the email and share it back and forth when it was updated. And now using Google Doc, we can share it in real time and update it as we need to, right up to the beginning of the semester and beyond. So yeah, anyone is willing, is happy to, I mean, we're happy to have anyone adapt that for their own use.
Great. And there's another question that came up. It says, can you elaborate on how your programs establish timelines for faculty to organize their projects and document them as CEL at your institution? Which that's great, because I was wondering that same thing.
You want to answer that?
Timeline for the project.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. It asks, can you elaborate how your programs establish timelines for faculty to organize their projects and document them as CEL at your institution. So how do you get faculty to, one, adhere to the timeline, right? Especially that pre-planning stage where it's not like the week before classes start, but it seems like it's taking place over the summer. So how do you establish those timelines?
Well, I guess I'll address that first. So my role is to work with the faculty and work with the community partners, and I facilitate this whole process. So I help find community partners, I help develop the projects and facilitate meetings, I help provide training on assignments and reflections and community partner working with students, and then the assessment at the end. And so the timing happens where, and some of it has just been kind of the way we've done it, and so now there's sort of that expectation, but it's also what works well, I think, is that we have course registration, and so for us it's coming up in a couple weeks, and so I always try to have a draft list of the courses and potential partners and maybe projects on that list, and that gets distributed to the whole campus. So the students have that list when they're looking for community engaged learning courses or in anticipation of a major course or a core course they might be taking. The advisors have that to use to share. We have scholars that are required to take community engaged learning, so they have that information. It's very tentative, and a lot of changes, especially before fall, will happen. But what that does is kind of force me very quickly, really between the end of September, beginning of October until, well, for the first semester, you know, it's usually through October until middle, end of November. And then for the second semester, it's February until end of March, to be able to then reach out to faculty, confirm repeats of courses, recruit new faculty, reach out to community partners, find out their needs, confirm repeat of former, projects, and do all of that communication and usually many meetings to get as good of a document as possible, knowing that a lot of information will still be developed after the fact. And so I think that kind of forces faculty to make decisions about whether they want to do this or not, even if they don't have everything set in stone. And so, like, I just talked to a professor that teaches a statistics class and said, yes, I think this can work. We have time. We have a couple options. We're going to take time to develop them. And so that's really the first phase. And then I ask for a project plan to be completed. We do offer stipends, and so that's required as kind of their application for the stipend. But most faculty do it because it's very helpful and they know it is. And that's not due until the beginning of the semester. So usually like a week or 2 weeks before the beginning of the semester, that's due. And so then we back up. It's like, what information do we need for that project plan? And so usually a couple weeks before the semester, if not much sooner, we have those meetings. So it might be way sooner to be able to identify who is the partner. Is this a good fit for this course? And that's the initial meeting. And then there's a follow-up meeting to identify some of the parameters of the project and logistics. And then usually there's a check-in right before the semester begins. And then depending on the outline of the course, we set up what is the orientation, when will the partner come into class or the students meet with them for an orientation, and then the rest of the semester kind of proceeds. So there's a lot of detail there that I added, but I hope that helps.
Yeah, we have quite a few
in helping with the timing and working with faculty and community partners.
Great. We have quite a few questions, so I want to make sure we have time to get to all of them. So there's a question: how do you balance the role of faculty and CEL staff on campus within each circle? So partnership development and project planning, context and systems, and cultural competency and communication. And then related to that, in terms of what you were talking about, like the steps, this gets to capacity per CEL staff in terms of the number of CEL courses you can support in a semester. So if you can kind of tie those between balancing the roles of faculty and CEL staff and sort of the capacity to support courses.
Well, I think that's a question for me again, although, yeah.
You can handle it.
Okay. Yes. So in terms of capacity of number of courses, that's a tricky one because right now at our institution, we're actually trying to grow into new majors that haven't been tapped before, haven't participated as part of our strategic plan. And yet at the same time, I closely work with faculty and community partners. And so there is a point where it's difficult to have those close support and relationships. And it varies every semester. Some faculty have their own partners and don't need as much support. They're returning, they've done this a lot, and some are brand new and needed much more support. So we at the college offer any semester between 20 and 28, I'd say, courses or course sections, and that seems to be the number that we want to strive for, more or less. About half our capacity building projects and about half our client support, direct service, and that's just sort of the way it ends up working out.
I would briefly add that I feel we're very fortunate to have Lynn and the staff and the program that we have here. When I came into this job after completing my doctoral work, I wanted to do civic engagement. I wanted to do service learning, and as junior faculty, it was very unlikely that I was going to be able to do it by myself. So we're in this situation where those of us who want to do this rely on Lynn to help us find the partnerships and to sort of, grease the wheels and get the process going. And once you are into it and committed to it, you start to have a love-hate relationship, because Lynn is very on top of, like, you need the project plan, you need to do the assessments, you need the impact assessment, you need to complete the paperwork. And for some of our colleagues, it's too much. Like they start to do it and then they say, I can't do that. And I look at it like we can't have a program if we don't work closely together, and we have to do that extra work, especially the documentation and paperwork. That kind of keeps everything going, and that sustains those relationships, and it sustains our legitimacy here. So we faculty who get into this work closely with Lynn, and that tends to work pretty well. And everyone is open to freestyling. If you want to have your own project and do it yourself and do civic engagement on your own terms, you can. You won't be funded, but you can do that. Does that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, it actually doesn't happen very much to do it completely on their own, because I do submit courses to the course registration for searching, and they sort of comes to me first. But absolutely, if a professor is very comfortable with a community partner, they've done this before, they have a good handle on it, then I let them go at it. So certainly, but I'm here if needed. And so there's a wide variety of support.
And so another question, have there been challenges with keeping continuity with groups over many semesters? Do community leaders change?
Yes.
Yes and no. Some have been the same for about 5 years, and we continued projects that have worked and are they depend on us to make those happen. We have a post-secondary transition program for individuals with disabilities that built into the website is the mentoring with Fisher students. And so they count on that to happen. So we want to make sure we find courses. So sometimes it's the other way around. The continuity of courses is not always there because courses are not always offered, or faculty go on sabbatical, or those kinds of things. So it's both. Sometimes there's great continuity, and sometimes people leave, change positions, programs close, whole nonprofits close. So yeah, all of that happens.
So the last 2 times I've taught, when I've had multiple partners, I've had a partner change within a couple weeks of the semester starting, and that's always tricky. It's still worth doing, but it is a very different set of challenges working with someone who wasn't in on the project from the beginning.
Right. So I think that speaks to another question that came up. What have you found are the biggest barriers, perceived or otherwise, to faculty participation in CEL, and how have you addressed those?
Well, I'll start really quick, but let's see if my colleagues want to chime in. So I think there's a number of barriers, and we've been working very steadily over the years to always be on top and understand what the challenges are and try to address those. And so I think time, certainly. faculty have many responsibilities and many expectations, and depending if you are junior or tenured, you're going to have different expectations for service and research and teaching, and usually the faculty that participate are very high achieving anyways and want to be involved, and so they tend to be involved in lots of things. And the course content itself, some courses or whole disciplines some are very structured and restrictive or have a lot of content, and so that can be a barrier. I can think of others, but maybe I'll have my colleagues chime in with that a little bit. What do you perceive as barriers?
So some of the barriers, yes. The first is that it's more time consuming than a regular course, at least if you're doing this for the first time. And it's always a bit more time consuming because you have to supervise the project outside of the normal hours and whatnot. But on the other hand, I think that it also presents many opportunities for faculty, because through the service learning, you're also doing a service to the community. I remember when I came here, one of my barriers was, because I was new to the area, I didn't know Rochester, was getting in contact with different community organizations. So I think that although it's time consuming on the one hand, it also brings many rewards to faculty. So for some of us who are in the field of the social sciences, for example, this is very central also to our research interests. So sometimes through our service learning courses, we can come up with ideas for a research project or for a service project outside of the class. But definitely it is more time consuming, and especially for a junior faculty, this is something that you have to find a balance, and also find a way in which this service learning project may also tie with other aspects of your career as a professor, like your research or your contribution to the larger community.
I think sometimes faculty are worried about the students' perception that it's not traditional learning. They're not just in their seats, engaged in a lecture, writing, or discussion, and worried about barriers of time. And so I often then demonstrate results, and I show the examples of students being more engaged, that increases the meaningfulness, that increases the application, their understanding, word of mouth, this is a favorite course. And so those are some ways to address barriers, but also ways to overcome them.
Right. So there's several questions that came up around this, and sort of more nuts and bolts, like how much is the faculty stipend, if you don't mind sharing, and what are some of the kind of requirements of that faculty stipend?
Well, it ranges, and it depends on if you're brand new versus returning. It depends on the size of whether it's required or optional, and the number of students. Sometimes it depends on the number of community partners. It depends if the course is brand new or returning, or the community partners are brand new. So we have a sort of a rubric that we use, and at least currently the most is $800. But we are looking at how we can use those monies in the future, and what makes most sense. But it's been very helpful, not just as a acknowledgement of the work that faculty put into the project, but also as a carrot to be able to get data, because we do require the 3-hour training to participate from me. We do require the orientation, which most faculty do anyways. We do require assessment at the end for the students and the faculty, and some examples of their work. Again, some faculty do that anyways, but that data has been very helpful, like Jim said, to be able to document outcomes and write reports and even get grants and to get funding from the institution. And we started as a fledgling grassroots program, and we come into an institute serving almost 1,000 students now. And so it's really because of that data and from the participation of faculty and our community partners.
Right. And then this will be the last question. Do your institutional leaders, deans and above, see the value in this approach to teaching? If so, could you tell us what that looks like?
Yes.
Yeah, do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
Well, I'll just preface really briefly, and then you can finish. So I'll just say this year, we have, the last couple of years, we've had huge support through our strategic planning process. We have a new pillar, community engagement pillar, that it has been added to our strategic plan to really recognize and highlight the work that's been done and to move it forward into bigger ways. And we have a provost and a president that's very supportive. And I'll let you add what you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely helps that the president and the provost are supportive, but we have a rank and tenure committee that is a little bit volatile these days, and there are powerful forces in that body that they tend to be more conservative about what counts as academic labor, and so this is a problem for civic engagement. It's not recognized and rewarded and esteemed as much as it probably should be, and that probably doesn't help. That said, the culture of the faculty and the students is such that we have a really vibrant program and it's doing pretty well. But this kind of thing depends on circumstances and where people are placed in the institution in different bodies, and it is not uniformly recognized and appreciated.
And I would just add that we applied and received the Carnegie classification, so I know that's going to be coming up in a couple of years, the next round, and so that is something that really moved us forward in terms of understanding all the different ways that we're engaged in community engagement and helping us to be institutionalized and to receive widespread support. So I would recommend if anyone has an opportunity to participate in that process. It's very time intensive, but worth it.
Right. Well, we're at time, and I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience on this topic during this webinar with our attendees, just gauging the amount of questions we have. There was a lot of interest in this. So again, thank you so much. For those attending, you will be receiving a copy of the slides along with the evaluation for this workshop within the next few days. So just be on the lookout for that. Thank you all so much, and until next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much
so
for the
much.
opportunity.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.